So this project came out of, way back in 2007, I was involved in a national project which was about engaging young people to campaign while learning from the abolition of the slave trade. So I was very familiar with the subject. And Hull Museums was one of the key partners in this. So they invited me back to review the learning at Wilberforce House. And it was learning and community engagement. And so this took several different forms. So we reviewed the displays. Now displays were created for the 2007 anniversary. That's quite a long time ago now. So we had a good look. And it's a very, very solid interpretation of the abolition of the slave trade. All the facts are there. A few of them are relating to the modern slavery issues, a little out of date. But it's still quite a very solid kind of narrative. So we reviewed that, and we spoke to other museums. And I should say this work was going on in the context of a lot of things were changing in heritage at that time. The Colston statue had just been pulled down, and Bristol museums were trying to work out what to do with it and how they were going to display it. Behind the scenes in museums, you might not believe this, but people rage on topics. So decolonisation was going on. How do we approach this? So the little bit you're seeing coming out of the National Trust, just imagine behind the scenes. All the other museums in Britain, that's all going on. So how do we approach it has been a key thing. Behind the scenes, curators are declaring themselves to be museum activists. I don't want to change it. It's true. So this is what's been going on behind the scenes. It's a bigger thing. So we spoke to museums. And there's a new forum being set up called the Transatlantic Slavery and Legacies Forum. Just trips off the tongue. And this involves Bristol museums, Glasgow museums, London, Hull and Liverpool, all the major slave centres of Britain. Apart from Hull, of course, because we weren't a slave centre here, but William Wilberforce was the local MP. So there is this was launched last November. But we spoke to these museums and looked at the different ways that they were approaching presenting slavery within their collections and also their learning programmes. Back at Bristol, you can imagine they were feeling a bit under pressure. The Colston statue had to be displayed. But we learned quite a few things about how they were going to do that. And they said, if you come to any of these slavery courts and you're talking about Wilberforce, they're going to start thinking you're talking about a white slave, white saviour. And this is quite a problem with Hull, because Hull is very, very white. And people over in Bristol are very, very radicalised at the moment. And what we don't want to do is swan in and present Wilberforce as that kind of white saviour. We then spoke to local community groups. Now, local community groups are quite difficult to find in Hull, since less than 5% of the population is of colour, and I think it's less than 1% is from the Afro-Caribbean community. So we're talking about a very small pool of people. And we also spoke to some more national groups. A further complication is if you're talking to people you've never met before, and your opening statement is something along the lines of, yes, I believe your ancestors were probably victims of slavery. Bit of conversation killer. And it's very difficult to approach. And also, I'm white, which doesn't help at all. So there were some challenging conversations there. Then we spoke to teachers, and again, we were doing this coming out of COVID, so talking to any teacher was pretty nigh impossible. So we only had a small pool, but the feedback we were getting from them was that junior school children were very, very cautious about talking about these kind of subjects, because they were hearing things in the news about police killing people of colour in the States and prejudice going on. So they were finding it difficult. And then in Black History Month, teachers were doing Black history, but they were using the big, well-known figures like Malcolm X and all that kind of thing. And so people were saying we need something more local. So that gave us quite a lot to think about. And we came back and we looked at the exhibition again, which again, not easy when the museum's closed because of COVID. And we realised that although it's a very, very solid history, there isn't a black voice in there. And also, amazing as it was, what happens with the abolition of the slave trade, this wasn't about white people. This was about the slaves, and their voice was just not being heard. And this needed to be put into the exhibitions, but also into the education resources. Now, compared to a lot of museums, actually Hull has quite a lot of learning resources about slavery. They actually do fairly well. But despite this needs to be foisted, and the project that we undertook was seen as a first step. This is not seen as the finished project, but it was a kind of moving to widen the voice, start getting more varied voices in there. So the aim was to embed the black voice within learning and within Wilberforce House displays, to work with local communities where we could, and to widen the narrative. Now, Nick knows absolutely everybody. So the first port of call really was Nick. And Nick had loads of ideas of different people that we could contact and talk to. So he came up with suggestions of who we could cover and who could actually help us with this. And what we didn't want was for me, white person, very well meaning, but still, you know, not my heritage, to write it all down and give it as a script to someone and say, can you do this? We wanted people of colour to look at the history, embrace the history, and say what they wanted to say. So to do this, I had to do a bit of research just to catch up on who these different people were. I developed key questions, and then we interviewed people. And the whole point of it, there isn't the right answer. It's what you want it to be. It's what you think happened, and how you think this person should be presented. Right, I have to be very careful here, because two of the people that we interviewed are in the room. So, this is what we did. So, number one was Equiano, a good fail-safe of the British national curriculum. And we asked Arthur Torrington. Now, Arthur Torrington got involved in the history of slavery during the 2007 anniversary. I don't think he's formally trained. I think he's an expert in his field because he's self-taught and because he's interested. The next person we did was Oscar Cuacuano, I can't pronounce that. And we asked Glynis, who's just arrived, who's thinking about okay. And Glynis is an artist and an archivist. Again, Cuacuano was part of the established British story of slavery, isn't that great? Was supposed to, by theory, then do Gustav Vasson, because he's one of the established people as well, but this is where we went off track, because this is where Nick says, to widen the narrative, we have to look wider than that. And it's quite frustrating that the curriculums keep people just in these particular characters. So, Thomas Peters from Sierra Leone, there's a biggish Sierra Leone community within Hull. And we asked Sidney to research and talk about him. Harriet Tubman. And I'm very pleased to see Shannon here, because Shannon was in Canada at the time when we did this. We had a very long Zoom call with her and her husband. Her husband was filming Shannon with the filmmaker with me, directing how it's a challenge. But again, Harriet Tubman, which is a different story from what the narrative that you normally hear in this country. And then the last person, and Shannon, obviously, PhDs all around the place and the rest of it. And then Chandler Saint was doing Adventure Smith. Now on your tables you will see Adventure Smith, his narrative. Now, he isn't a colour, but he is expert, and again, he's self-taught. And I think this is one of the things that quite often we just look to, sorry about this university, just look to academics. I think they're the only people that are experts. But if you want certain community histories, You need to go to the communities to find them. So why are all these people relevant? They approached the situation of slavery in very different ways. So Equiano and Cupiano, as I say, the standard people, what they eventually did is they embraced British ways and used that to fight with the politicians in a way that people understood. Having said that, Cupiano was an activist, and he would have probably glued himself to a statue or whatever if he were on train, if he was around today, but he was a bit more there. And they were part of something called Sons of Africa, which, I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I found no little information about this. It's actually a vastly important group because they were the first abolitionist group within Britain, or first black group, abolitionist group, or first black activists, as they recognise as. Now, as a white person researching this, what I found is if you just ignore all the established things about slavery and you just start reading these narratives, suddenly the world looks very different. Suddenly you've got a network of people who are striving very ardently to change their own world. And I think that has been forgotten, overlooked, because the white narrative has been writing the history of slavery, and it's vitally important. Thomas Peters was a founding father, so basically he came over to Britain, said we need a place that's safe for slaves, and went back to Sierra Leone and was part of the initial government of it. Benjamin Smith, whose story you've got, he followed all the rules of white slavery, and he bought himself and then family members he was able to, and then not random, I don't know, people he knew who were slaves. He worked hard in addition to his slavery duties, and he saved the money and he bought them out of slavery, and he was following the rules essentially. That was his way of liberating people. And Harriet Tubman, you know about the Underground Railway and the amazing things that she did. And what's quite strange about this is she is a woman, but she was probably the most out there of them all, just getting on and doing it. So, you know, they're all amazing. So I've selected two films just to show you, partly because they make a point at the end that I think is very, very valid.
Thomas Peters, what a great man. He was actually not a Sierra Leonean. He ended up being a Sierra Leonean because of the journey. He was born in Yoruba land in Nigeria, which is West Africa. He was captured in Nigeria, his home country, and then brought to the United States of America. There he was enslaved. During the American War of Independence, he decided to do a runner from the enslaved master and decided to fight alongside the British. They lost the war. Britain did lose the war, but they were promised that they would be taken to Nova Scotia to have a better life. And surprisingly, the land was barren, it was cold, and the majority of the indigenous there did not like them, and they were nearly enslaved. He heard about the Wilberforce Abolitionists and the anti-slavery movement in England. Then he decided to tell the rest of his men if there is a chance he will come and see if they could come and revive the Freetown project. The Sierra Leone project actually started to actually create a place like England whereby nobody's allowed to be enslaved. That's how Freetown started. John Clarkson decided to be the leader. Then Thomas Peters said, I'm the speaker for the people who you've brought here. So Thomas Peters and John Clarkson did not get on at all. If you were in the Freetown company, you work for them for like 10 or 12 years. At the end, you will be a free man. Thomas Peters didn't like that. But Thomas Peters didn't last long. Within a year, he passed away. And there was a lot of suspicion. Some people thought from the African narrative, from the oral tradition of Africans from Sierra Leone, the Creole tribe, they believe he was probably assassinated or there was a foul play. Although the authors from the European point of view did not agree with that narrative that he was ill, probably malaria, and passed away. For me, he's my hero, to be honest. And in Sierra Leone, we even forgot to celebrate him because most of the narrative of the books we were using during the colonial time We have books that we are reading that makes all the other abolitionists look like they are the one who should have all the credit. It was recently when people do proper research, they say, come on, this guy is really a key player in the founding of Freetown. So he now have a statue. He's like the Nelson Mandela of Sierra Leone, to be honest.
Ottobah Cugoano was born in 1757 in Ajumako, a village on the Gold Coast of Ghana. We don't really know much about his early life. I was trying to surmise he was about 13 when he was captured. He ended up being owned by Maria and Richard Cosway. They were quite famous, they were painters. They provided education, taught him to read and write. Cugoano wrote his book in 1787, and he was the first Afro-Briton to do so, to write a treatise on anti-slavery and to speak out about slavery. He used passages from the Bible because the Bible was used to justify slavery. White people were Christian and good, and black people were sort of savages, heathen, anything negative you could think of. But yet they brought Christianity and wanted to sort of convert the slaves to Christianity. Jesus certainly did not advocate slavery. He also urged enslaved people to free themselves. People's obligation to resist and to free themselves from slavery. They should fight the evil trade because it was wicked. It dehumanized not only the African people, but it also affected the white people involved as well. They were reduced to performing acts of unspeakable cruelty. Basically, Cugoano was fighting to end slavery and to free all the slaves. A lot of the scholars in this area are white scholars. It is important. There's more black scholars, there's more African, Caribbean scholars who look at these issues and also do the research to find more information and also relate it to what's happening today as well.
We met through City of Culture through Joe, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and
I met Joe.
There wasn't a real plan, but it was just an encounter. It was the perfect collaboration, I guess, really, where you want to share ideas. And I think I was just throwing out questions, which is what I do when I make a film, really. What about this? What about that? She said, oh, come on, yeah, you should speak to Nick because, you know, slavery. And we didn't really have a firm idea, but through a real genuine creative collaboration, because I didn't do the piece, I was just curating it and you were just providing all the facts and figures, and then we brought the artist in and then we started this really interesting, and they got really into it, and Terry was fantastic on the music. With
everybody was brilliant.
It was really methodical.
Lots of people helped us and lots of people worked with us, and we all just respected each other. It was just lovely to be able to bounce ideas off. Like they could ring up and say, what music would people have heard in the past? And went about Morse code, so that's brought into the arrivals and departures. Then we said Eternal Father, thinking of Rob Robinson's work on that being written in the city. And then there were lots of images, names, everything. It was great. It just to absolutely see it. And we kept seeing it up to Christmas Eve. I always call it my Christmas present on 2016 because I saw the final cut 6 days before it was then projected. But it was when it was projected, you then saw that massive audience reaction.
Tonight we're here in the City of Culture, the opening event called Made in Hull, and we're privileged to be able to show an installation called Arrivals and Departures, which draws on the research that I've conducted at the University of Hull. I wrote some research a few months ago which is going to come out for the City of Culture later this year. And so what we see here behind me are snippets of that story and a big visual montage of the story of the different migrants, the communities, both how they came here physically on trains, on boats or trekking, but also the individuals who came as well. All of them were effectively working hands that made Hull, shaped Hull in the past 2 centuries.
Just to be involved personally, I guess it's just good to say, you know, I've contributed to this. Hopefully, in terms of my career, being involved in a project like this it's a good brand name, and to say you've done paid work for the City of Culture is something which hopefully people will take note of. I'll be able to say I was involved with that. Having
The work I've done projected onto it has been really an amazing experience, a personally important experience because my family, my friends, my students have come and seen it, but also amazing because it's had such a huge reaction with the community, a community I've loved, I've studied and researched for all of these years.
It's about creating what we created in 2017, 365 days a year. It's trying to create spaces where everybody's voice is heard, where we challenge people's thinking, where we say, never mind the person in charge, the head honcho, the rich person. We hear about working hands, working lives. So today what we've been doing is learning from around the world how people have tried to create different ways to inform people, particularly young people and especially kids, about they've got rights, they've got their identities are right, and that's what we need to protect. And so by bringing everybody together, especially because of Sean's brilliant filmmaking, and this afternoon we've got a filmmaker from Sierra Leone, it's that opportunity to collaborate and how as like-minded people we can share ideas and hopefully help inspire more people that their voice matters. Get your voice heard, see yourself in public spaces because you're important.